Hi, guys. We're back. Recently, there was a Twitter trend going around where people were discussing what they think Nintendo's biggest mistake was. And a lot of it was like just business decisions that ended up being bad. It's like Virtual Console, not Virtual Console, Virtual Boy and the Wii U. And like that's relatively boring to me because it's just like, yeah, they took a financial hit. That's not like a fun and interesting discussion to be had. So, I mean, I basically put my hat into the ring. I said that Nintendo and Apple have the same overlapping issue. Anytime they try to be at the forefront of tech, anytime Nintendo tries to do 3D, anytime they try to be actually like competitive with their graphical software, they tend to flop to the side. And they are at their best when they're reusing old tech for new ideas because it's cheap to produce and more interesting. They don't have to rely on selling the technology, they can just sell the game, what you're doing, the activity with it. I think that's always been more successful. Ergo, I mean, the Wii U was them trying to compete essentially with the graphics of the time in their own way. Meanwhile, they had an immense amount of success just shoving a Wii U into the gamepad and saying, that's the console now. We got the Switch. There's a bunch of other examples throughout history, but I bring all this up to say my petty version, my answer that I think is like Nintendo's biggest mistake that they were never going to do, but is fun to think about, is not purchasing Rareware Studios. I think Rare, specifically in, early 2000s, represents the closest thing to like a non-Japanese Nintendo studio that could have ever existed, and Microsoft purchasing Rare in the early 2000s really just completely destroyed their track record, completely destroyed people's faith in their games, and completely just dismantled the kind of structure for ingenuity that they initially had. And what really got me thinking about this was I was playing Mario Kart World on my Switch 2. Can I just say, I am such a fucking bootlicking slut for Mario Kart World. I love it so much. People are right to complain about how it's $80. It's too expensive for a game. However, I will pay double for that game. The soundtrack alone, if Nintendo said, we're going to release the game, it's going to be $70 like every other game, but if you pay $30 more, you can have this soundtrack, I'll pay $60 more. It is the amount of fun that I've had just getting a little high and jumping off of the walls, racing around in the open world just cuz. It's so fun. Every time someone's like, Mario Kart World, bad game, bad release title, I just have to block them out and live in my own peace because it's so fun. I love it. That's a tangent. All that is to say, the flip side of me loving Mario Kart is that I don't love Diddy Kong Racing. And I remember specifically when that game came out on N64, I liked my Mario Kart 64, I liked my Wave Race, kinda, but I hated Diddy Kong 64 because of the way it controlled. I didn't like how you got on an inner tube and just were like floating around. I didn't like the air portions where you're trying to fly around. Meanwhile, I'm over here playing Mario Kart World where being on the water and being in the air is an absolute joy. And so I can't help but recognize that Rare was constantly like pushing boundaries and really stepping outside of the standard and kind of always figuring out something that they could add that was just a little bit more interesting, something that switched up the game and made it really stand out. Sometimes this works out, like the first Banjo Kazooie and 007. Sometimes it doesn't, We've got our Perfect Darks. We've got, well, that's more of a marketing thing, but like, it doesn't work out when you got your Donkey Kong 64, your Banjo Kazooie 2. Like, there are certain titles where they push and really go for it and flop. Yet there's other titles where they push and go for it and just really show off how revolutionary their mindset can be. And I think if Nintendo was a different company, they were actually interested in purchasing video game studios in a way that like allowed them to hoard more things with their talent, because of course that's just not the way they do things. They like to create relationships rather than just like buying things outright, and it seems to work perfectly fine for them. But if Nintendo had purchased Rare, if Microsoft was like, we're gonna do this thing, and Nintendo was like, not on my watch, and came in, I think Rare would be probably one of the best studios today, because essentially what Rare needs often is just someone in the room being like, that's not fun. Take that out. That's too much. Take that out. Keep that idea, but give me 50% less. Like, imagine Donkey Kong 64 if there were just less collectibles. It would have been a lot more fun. Like, it would have just been more approachable, more exciting, and, you know, still would have been its mildly lackluster open space where you're just running around collecting things, but it wouldn't have been so daunting that people are looking at this game being like, you want me to collect how many bananas? It's crazy. And I see Nintendo's relationship with Retro Studios in a very, very similar light, where Nintendo will often come in. I specifically remember during the Metroid Prime development period where, you know, Retro's doing this thing, and then Miyamoto would come in and just give like a note here or there, push them in a direction that feels a little bit more authentic, feels a little bit more fun. And they follow that design, and look what we get. Metroid Prime on the GameCube. It's fantastic. It's not my personal preference. I don't want to backtrack again because I am lost, and I don't want to do that. But I can admit it's a great little franchise they've created. And so if Rare had that kind of guidance, I think if they had a not adult in the room, but like someone who's just like pragmatic and less interested in just trying to aggressively stand out, you know, honoring the game that we're playing a little bit more, I think it would have been a complete game changer, pun intended, for the gaming industry. And I think the space that Rare is in now, where they've released great games, but it never feels like they always feel like they're on the brink of like going away, right? It never feels like they're building on something. It always just feels like, you know, they're releasing a game. Let's hope this works. And I think having someone like Nintendo either financially supporting or, you know, just giving them more guidance would allow them to try these interesting things without the fear, without the possible missteps that come along with, you know, needing to make a dollar at the end of the day. Plus, I mean, the way that Microsoft just threw Rare into the just factory of making Kinect shovelware for their console is so disappointing to see. Because again, it's like these aren't bad games. Like what is it? Pinata? Viva Pinata? Perfectly good game. Perfectly fine. Not really what we needed at the time. Meanwhile, all the Kinect games, the sports games that Rare made, like they're good. They're fine. But again, they're not ever going to truly be the thing that Rare is best at, right? And that's coming up with a really good idea, probably 10 years too early, and then being praised for it when it's far too late and there's no money to make off that idea anymore. I think if someone was in the room, like if Nintendo had purchased the company, they would be able to test out those ideas and be kind of like held back a little bit so they can build on creating a franchise rather than just throwing stuff at the wall, kind of creating too much of an experience and then having to either cut it down so they can release the game or releasing something that feels almost disjointed because there are so many different ideas. Anyway, I just think that's really fucking fascinating. I think Rare is a great the period between like the early 2000s where Microsoft was coming in being like, hey, this is our thing now. We're doing this thing, and just like seeing how they shook up the industry as a whole is very fascinating. Also, do we believe there's always these rumors about how like Microsoft thought they were buying the rights to Donkey Kong and that's why they wanted Rare in the first place? I don't believe that. I don't believe that a entire $1 million company, I mean billions of dollars, it's $1 trillion now, but at the time probably billions of dollars, they're worth so much money. Are we really going to sit here and believe that they just like made a little oopsie and didn't realize that the IP they were spending millions of dollars in purchasing and locking Nintendo out of wasn't actually there? Like that's not a thing. I'm sure there might have been some pettiness with purchasing Rare in the relationship to Nintendo because Microsoft wanted to at first purchase Nintendo and kind of got laughed out of the room. But I don't believe that that was a factor. If anything, they were probably just trying to take away one of Nintendo's golden gooses so that they could have those consoles or they could have those game on their consoles. And that's just not really how video game development works. That's not really how it all shakes out. But anyway, I mean, I'm not you'll never see me betting against Microsoft's ability to not read the room, to not understand what the people want. So who knows? Who knows what that actually is? But alas, I just think that's so fascinating to think about. I think the way Rare used to be and the way they are now is wildly different. And I think that if Nintendo had purchased them, I think if they had made a big boy acquisition back in the day, we really would be looking at a different video game industry. And I also wonder what it would look like if Nintendo did just buy out things, right? Like they rarely put their fingers in the mix when it comes to studios. You right? They're usually just like, "Hey, you want to do some stuff?" I think since they have such high retention in their company, they're not so much worried about, you know, grabbing talent from other studios and locking them down. But I don't know. I respect them a lot. Either way, those are my thoughts. I just wanted to get online and talk about that for a little bit because it's something that I think is fun. And also, I can't put this in a tweet. So, cheers. Hope you guys have a good day. Let me know what you think.